As I said earlier, we're still there's still all the big issues happening, kind of energy bills and rising cost of living. And this term, what we wanted to do in our services is just to focus on kind of finding God where we are, is our kind of title for the term. And so this morning we're going to be thinking about kind of finding God in our finances and in those difficult situations where it feels like everything around us is a bit out of control, and Mike's going to be sharing what Crosslight do. And before he comes to speak, we're just going to show you a little video, Nabila's story. She's somebody that Crosslight has helped.
My name is Nabila Al-Dasuki. I live in Shepherd Bush. I'm from Egypt. I have 2 children, 1 girl and 1 boy. I'm working in a restaurant. I'm a chef, and I'm a single mother. When they send a letter to me to say, on this time, if you didn't pay the rent or give our money back, we're going to take your flat. When my son read the letter, he started to cry. He told me, Mom, we're going to like homeless people in the street. How are you feeling inside? I feel I'm not a good mother because I'm trying to make them. I'm trying to live with my children in a safe way. I'm working. I'm looking for 2 children. The Crosslight, because I don't know how to write, they help me. When I speak to Stephen, he told me, Nabila, come. In the same day, I call him, Stephen, can I come today, please? He said, of course, you're welcome anytime. I'm a Muslim, but I'm in the church. I'm never thinking before the church, they help me. I'm not feeling like before. Before I was looking what's going on. Maybe the bailiffs coming anytime to kick me out, but now no, because I know who's supporting me. The Crosslight. When anyone asks me what's going on in your situation now, I said I'm okay. I'm with the Crosslight. They help me too much.
Good morning. First of all, thank you so much for letting me come and talk to you today. These slides, by the way, are... Oh, sorry. Yeah, these slides are today to remind me what to say, and so I don't drone on too long. So if I see you dozing off, I'll take the hint. So I'm the branch manager of Crosslight Tunbridge Wells, and I'm a trustee of the charity called West Kent Debt Advice, who funds it all. And today I'm going to explain who Crosslight are, what they do, how they do it, and how you guys can help us in that. I have to say that we've been working in food banks since the beginning of the year, and we come to your food bank once a month. And your office team and your food bank team are just wonderful, because they're doing what we try to do, but in a much more tangible way, in showing God's love for the community around us. And they have brought people to us. We've had many conversations with people who want to understand things this energy issue will be the next one, because the government doesn't always communicate things as clearly as they might. But they'll also come to us with problems that may not be the larger problems, but some of them do have the larger problems, and like Nabila, then we'll do more work with them to bring them through it. But Crosslight is a Christian organisation, and the Bible verse that we use from Samuel, he puts poor people on their feet again, he rekindles burnt out lives with fresh hope, restoring dignity and respect to their lives, is really what we work by. Our volunteers are, well, Tunbridge Wells is totally volunteers. Throughout the Crosslight network, we do have some full-time people, so we can maintain contact during the day, and they can contact then the relevant caseworkers or advisors. And some aren't Christian, but the majority are, and they give their time freely. So what is Crosslight Advice? So we have 18 branches. They're in London, down the M4, but 3 of them are in Kent. And West Kent Debt Advice was, well, we used to be known as the Tunbridge Wells Community Centre for Debt Advice. Now, when you try and say that 50 times a day on the phone, it gets quite tiring. So we then changed it to Tunbridge Wells Debt Advice, and now we're Crosslight. But our funding organisation, as I said, remains West Kent. We serve, as you've seen, the whole community, regardless of race, religion or gender. In that work, our advice covers Sevenoaks, Tunbridge Wells and Tonbridge, and the outlying distant districts thereof. We obviously have a limited capacity because it's volunteers that do it, but we will take people who can travel further. But as I'll explain later, we use the internet and telephones extensively, but there is an important first start with a client, which really is more helpful to be face-to-face. And that's when we tell them that we're Christians and we're trying to show God's love in the community. We don't proselytize, it's not a conditional service, but we remind them at Easter and Christmas that they're welcome at services, and we send small gifts and things. But to remind them, and we offer prayer. And what's very striking in my experience is, I think I've only had once somebody refuse prayer, whether they're Christians or not. So we hope we're trying to do what God commanded. So Crosslight itself, we're a member of Advice UK, which is the umbrella organisation nationally. So although we're volunteers, we are trained to a standard required by the Financial Conduct Authority. And we're a registered non-profit making charity because there is very little government funding for this type of work. So it all comes through private donations, company donations and churches. Churches are a very strong part of our network. The services in Kent, Sussex and Sevenoaks are all on church premises, as actually are the majority of our branches. That reinforces the message that the church is here to help, but also it's a very cost-effective way, because we'll obviously pay the costs we incur there, but it is a centre where we can bring people into a Christian environment and reinforce the message that we're trying to make. Our offices in Tunbridge Wells are what used to be the United Reformed Church. It's the, I always forget what it's called now, the Tunbridge Wells United Evangelical Church. Because most of our volunteers work, we hold appointments on Thursday evenings and Monday mornings. But of course, throughout the week, we're doing telephone appointments, and we can set up emergency appointments face-to-face, of which we've had a couple here, and we've used your facilities here. So it's very good, particularly for people who don't want to be able to have to travel a long way, and somewhere that's quiet where they can speak confidentially. We also offer an education, which I'll come on to later, which is what we call the money course or the budget course, where we help people who aren't necessarily in debt to manage their money. So they may be newly married couples, recently bereaved, or somebody who just wants to get a grip, or people who are saving and things like that. So that is really designed around avoiding people getting into debt. But once we've been through the work with people who are in debt, we try and encourage them to go on this so that they can maintain their finances without necessarily us being involved as heavily as we have been. Other than food banks, we attend other community meetings so that people are aware of the service. And some of them we're actually there to give advice at, like the food bank. So although we have limited volunteers, we try and get around as many places as we can. So what causes debt? When people come to us, they're often quite ashamed. Because of that, they leave it a long time. Or they just haven't heard, which is really something that worries us, that we're there. But it isn't, in my experience, I've been doing it for about 20 years, and I think I've only had 2 people who I would say were just very foolish. The main reasons for debt are unemployment, redundancy, ill health, addiction, disablement, divorce and separation, or bereavement. All of these can lead to other issues, as I've shown up there. So they sort of feed off each other. And for example, over the recent COVID, it has put more pressure on relationships at home. And we're seeing more referrals to us from the domestic abuse charity, DAVS, where those relationships have just broken down. And in those cases, in the worst cases, families are just taken away overnight and put in accommodation at a safe distance. And they can be the other side of Kent, down in Sussex. They can be a long way away. And they're often not very comfortable, to put it mildly. And the families going there, mum and the kids particularly, probably left with a suitcase and escorted by the police. So there's a whole layer of support that goes with that, some of which the social services can do, but we can help with small grants, and we can help by telling the people who are pursuing them, because strangely the Post can pursue them, even if they... and we can take that on to stand between them and those people while they resolve the issues they have. The problem. We live in Tunbridge Wells, which most people see as a very wealthy community. I have to say, there are places in Tunbridge Wells as bad as some of the worst in the UK. And it's just not seen generally. More and more, I think, we're aware of it. But over the country, I mean, 1.43 trillion of debt. Now, most people will incur some form of debt in the hope or in the understanding that their income will be able to pay that level of debt. But when the things I mentioned earlier happen, illness, unemployment, whatever, suddenly they're in that terrible place. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with debt, but what it can do is leave people exposed to the sudden and unforeseen. Debt's doubled in the last decade because people have got used to using credit cards, etc., more and more, and are being pushed in that direction by retail technology in particular, so that the average debt in the UK is 54,000, and that's gone up from 29 just 10 years ago. In fact, I think this figure's gone up since I prepared this. More than 4,000 people are made homeless each year because of rent and mortgage debt. And they are particularly difficult debts to handle because the people to whom money is owed have established legal rights. So we have to rely on them by negotiating with them, or with the courts by persuading the courts not to grant repossession orders and things, if we can build a plan, which I'll come on to later, that shows these people can recover the situation in time. Alongside that, benefits in the UK have reduced. They were at a relatively high level during the COVID crisis, but that emergency support was taken away. And costs now are rising, as we know, because of all the things we hear in the news, not least of which is energy. And energy is something everybody that we speak to particularly need, because without warmth, they get ill, and without the ability to cook, they get ill. And so a lot of our work is negotiating with the creditors to change tariffs, spread payments, and now at last we've got some news that will help at least the further increase. But as I said, I think it needs interpreting. And so food banks are a great place to do that. A lot of the conversations we have at food banks are because we do little summaries about the latest topic to say, did you know, or this is what it means. And they'll often come up and have a chat and go through that to be reassured they've understood it. Or if it's a problem, then we'll do more work with them in a more formal situation. But we also have a thing called open advice, which means people can ring up with, say, one issue, and if we can deal with that without the need to build a whole casework and write to all the creditors, we'll do it that way as well. So there's a more immediate solution. And again, we step in with the Department of Work and Pensions or whoever it might be to resolve the issues. So when I mentioned that Tunbridge Wells, we have in just our centre alone over 500,000 of debt that we manage on behalf of our clients. And that client base is turning over a lot of the time. But it covers quite a wide area, to be fair. But when people are on average £20 a month is all they've got between something going wrong that they hadn't expected and being able to eat or pay their bills. So that's how fine a margin it is. And of course, that over the last few weeks has increased in pressure. So we expect to see quite an upturn in the number of people coming to us. When we can't do the work, we refer them to other debt advice charities. But one of the things we do that is unique is that we will stay with a client as long as it takes. Some of them we've had for almost 15 years because perhaps they have mental illness or other issues that mean they can't really ever feel independent or resolve it on their own. But other people we can be working with perhaps for a year. They've got a payment plan set up and then they can manage it themselves, but can always call us if they get into a problem. So it's a mixture of clients that we deal with. You can see that credit card, council tax is one where the council are sometimes unknowingly pursuing people who just can't pay. That's often because the people that are in problems just refuse to communicate. They hide. They put it in a suitcase or hide it under the mattress. And that's a particularly dangerous thing to do because we can actually help those problems diminish. And what we're trying to do is equip them to live a life that's stress-free, particularly for families, and also to give them the confidence back that enables them to go back into the work market if it's unemployment, or if it's ill health, make sure they've got all the services and support they need to get through that particular time of their life. What we do. So, when somebody comes to us, we will either establish that it's just a one-off question, but if it's clearly going to be a larger issue, we start what we call the casework process, and we sit down and we work out what the income and expenditure that household has, and talk through the circumstances that led to it. Now, people come to us often very broken, so a lot of our work, particularly in the early stages, is counselling. It's not just about debt. You know, it's reassuring them that we're here, it's earning their trust, and it's making some big wins quickly to give them that feeling that they're making progress as well. When we get that information together, we prepare a thing called a financial statement which summarizes that information. And that's what we use when we write to the creditors that they owe money to, because it's a universal format agreed by the banks and larger companies, by which we and other debt agencies communicate to them to demonstrate how much is affordable. And it's an agreement between the debt agencies and them that we do look at this seriously, because I've had one or two people who are not familiar with it think that we're just setting up these numbers to make it look worse than it is. So we work on both sides. We're even-handed, so that trust can be maintained. So when we're asking them not to collect money, they understand and believe that we've gone through that. That work is often quite confidential, so it isn't always easy to do in open format in a food bank. But we can start a conversation, and we can then, as I said, do it by telephone or face-to-face appointments at a separate time. It's the social services, DABS, Citizens Advice, Mind. There's a lot of referrals to us, but we also refer people to them where we believe they can get support. So it's quite a healthy relationship, although most of the charities are finding their resources limited. We therefore establish an affordable solution with their creditors. We negotiate payment plans with those creditors. We ensure that their benefits are right, because sometimes people don't realise what they're entitled to. And that can be quite a large number sometimes. And one of the larger things, for example, is a personal independence payment called PIP, where a disability or an illness, there is significant government support to help people with that. It will predominantly be to give them what they need because they are disabled. So it could be equipment, or it could be help with getting food delivered, or it could be furniture. It could be all sorts of things. But those are particularly strong benefits that people aren't always aware. And the system by which benefits are given can be quite tormented and complex, and almost designed not to give them. So we have people that sit in with our client on those interviews and make sure they're not misled or bullied, and make sure the reviewers actually make notes of what's going on, because the points you're awarded in those conversations are what determine how much you get. Could you stand? Can you wash up? Of course I can. Then they move on. What they don't know is that you can only stand for 1 minute, or, you know, there's lots of, those subsidiary questions aren't asked for. So that's what we do. So, as I said before, we can do this over years, and we try to educate people to avoid getting there or to overcome their current situation. Money education. This can be done online, on your own, or in a group, or we will run them at the centre, or we will run them in churches, or we will train church members to give the course and support them with the materials. The idea being, it's to really trying to dissociate it from debt, because it's not about debt, it's about managing your money. So the emotional relationship with money, we helped create budgets. And once we've done the theory, by the way, you then get a budget coach to put it into practice in case the gobbledygook didn't really make sense. So it's a very practical form of support. And that goes on for several months. So people can refer to us, usually the first time they blow the budget, what do I do next? We've just started a student money course, which is for people just about to go off to college, university, or even into the world of work. And we had successfully launched it just before COVID and then had to stop it. It was really successful. We think partially because it was fueled by soft drinks and pizza, but nevertheless the feedback was fantastic. And there's lots of tips about where to buy things economically, rail fares, pizza, how to manage the budget. You know, if you're in a flat with 4 other students, if any of you have been there, it can be quite tormenting. So they end up budget coaching with a bit of luck to try and pull a bit of order into the chaos. And we hope to introduce that into schools so that it can be given into schools. Much like I was saying churches would do it for adults, we would teach and train or do it for them. And it would be obviously in their final year. So going on to the budget coaching further, so I'd just like to stress that these courses are not just for people in debt. And the ones we run in groups, you're not really having to discuss your personal affairs. You're there with resolving how to manage things as a group, and then the budget coaching later can deal with any personal issues. Am I okay for time still? So, how can you help? Well, the first and most important thing we ask for is prayer. Without that, it makes our work impossible. We know there are times where we've had to ask for prayer amongst supporting churches because things have become difficult, or we know we've got a series of difficult issues to confront, and God's work is always shown. Volunteers. Most people think it's you have to be an accountant or love numbers. It's far from that. As I mentioned, counselling is 50% of the work. We provide training so that when somebody says they would like to volunteer, we say, well, come along and sit in on a few meetings with the clients with the client's permission, to get a flavour for it, because some of it can be quite raw and difficult, and if you're not equipped to deal with that, it may be that debt advice isn't the thing for you. But I think there's only one person in my experience who's had to do that. But actually they became an administration volunteer. And actually in many ways it is as valuable, because it means the other volunteers can get on with casework and writing all the letters to banks, creditors and all that they can take on. The only thing I would say is that it would be ideal if you could use a laptop, but we train you in the use of it, and we have some really good and nice systems that save you having to add up and take away. It does it all for you. When I started, we spent more time checking our numbers than giving advice. So, Thursday evenings and Monday mornings are when we do face-to-face advice, but each case is given a case manager, so whilst you might not meet a case manager, whatever goes on at that meeting, the case manager will be looking at, and he will then be in touch, or she, managing the case, dealing with the creditors, etc., and keeping in touch with you, and that would be your main appointment source, contact source, should any problems arise. Budget coaching is another thing that we can train people, as I explained. It's a common sense thing, really, but the aids just make it simpler to understand. And we do a lot of budget coaching, and always people thank us afterwards profusely, because it's something we don't ever get trained to do. You know, we just inherit a natural skill somehow. Education is a very, very important part of what we do. So, I know I've been gabbling a bit. If there's any questions you have, please see me afterwards. I've got leaflets of where you can ring. These are for you also to give to people you know who might need them. So if you know anybody in financial problems, or you think might want a budget course, suggest that you can even come along with them if you want. I mean, often it gives moral support to them if they feel there's somebody going through it with them. But any other questions, I'll be there to answer. There'll be some of these leaflets which have got a lot of that information on them up at the back. I think you've got some already, but I'll put some more out. But please, please do speak to me. So thank you again for listening to me. I hope either you find it helpful or you know people it would help. But thank you to the church for letting me drone on. Thank you. Oh, thank you.